Okay, so welcome to the webinar on making the most of the PSAT and NMSQT. As we're getting started, I'm going to start our first poll, which is what child is your grade in? So if you could please answer that, I'd like to know who we have on our call. So let us know what grade your child is in, please. So why in the world are we doing this? Well, since 1999, we have just enjoyed and thrived in the environment of walking out the college-bound journey with families that are seeking the best fit college at the best return on investment for their child. So that's been our passion since 1999. And frankly, I was a high school teacher prior to that and starting in 1991, so that's really been my passion my entire professional career. I want to introduce myself. I am Lisa Marker Robbins. I am the founder and CEO of LEAP. And Sherry Elmore, while not leading us today, is our point person for all things testing related. So ACT, SAT, PSAT, pre-ACT, any of those things. So she is the person that many of you already have talked to or emailed with as she's tried to give you guidance in that. So I'm going to go ahead and close our poll. It looks like we've got even split between 10th and 11th graders with maybe one ninth grader on our call. So everybody's voted. Terrific. Thank you. Okay, we're going to have another poll in just a second. Okay. What are these tests? So this is what we really need to get at the heart of, like, why are we even taking them? So the PSAT is, as it sounds like, a pre-SAT. It literally is testing the exact same skills as an SAT would. Many of you know that the SAT was overhauled and it's more similar than ever to the ACT. But the PSAT also doubles as the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, and we're going to talk more about that. Those scholarships could provide anywhere from, $1,000, $2,000 maybe to the college of your choice, up to a full ride, depending on the college that you choose. So it's a pretty big deal. Nationally, when we look at the national population, we see almost all 11th graders taking it. Now, colleges don't see this, so it's not necessary for all 11th graders to take that. But we've also seen a move towards many 10th graders taking it and some 9th graders as well. And we'll talk about who those 9th and 10th graders are that maybe really should consider taking the PSAT as we go a little farther. Well, actually, let's talk about it now. LEAP recommends that if you are an honor student or a high-achieving 10th grader, that you should consider taking the PSAT. I was speaking at a local high school a couple weeks ago, and they were asking for input on identifying 10th graders who we would recommend taking the PSAT. 10th graders who should take it, I said if you really just want to run the numbers to try to identify these students, it would be taking honors English and at least 1 year accelerated in mathematics. So those would be, and getting good grades in those classes. So those would be our students who, as 10th graders, should possibly consider it. If you're on this call today, and we know half of you do have 10th graders, and you're thinking, oh, we missed the boat, we should have taken it last October, because it is given only every October on a national test date. We'll give you that date for 2017 coming up. LEAP does have a solution for you, so stay tuned. I'll let you know what that solution is in just a little bit. But even for our 11th graders, while it's terrific practice for the ACT and SAT, colleges aren't going to see this. So again, your real focus as far as scholarship should be on our honor students. However, there are benefits for non-honor students to take this as well. So what we're going to look at, and I build this as 4 action steps from your PSAT, we're going to look at the practice it provides, helping you determine ACT or SAT in 11th grade. I know the majority of the people on our call, on our webinar this evening, are Ohio students, not everybody, but we have a lot of Ohio students on, and new in 2017 is every junior taking either the ACT or the SAT. Just because your school might be giving, say, actually here in the greater Cincinnati area where I am tonight, and we're also in Columbus here in Ohio, but all of the greater Cincinnati high schools are giving the ACT with the exception of 3 schools. And just because your school's giving the ACT in March or April doesn't mean that you couldn't or shouldn't necessarily also take the SAT. So we're going to give you guidance on figuring that piece out as well. This should also help you in future course selection. I know many of the high schools in the area are already starting scheduling, and it'll even be wrapped up as we get to the beginning of February. So I'm going to tell you how to interpret the information from the PSAT to encourage you on what classes to take. And then finally, we're going to talk about national merit qualification and the details of how that works. So remember, no colleges will see these scores. So when I say it's terrific practice, you know, if you go to a high school where they're not giving it to every junior, I want you to think about the fact that it would be good practice for you to sign your junior up. So if you currently have a sophomore, to sign your junior up to take it in October. It will also help, as you're going to see, give you direction on ACT or SAT. It will, I think it is October the 11th this coming year. So the way this works is it is given every October. Unlike the ACT and the SAT, which are given 6 and 7 times a year, there's only one test date. In years past, we have had students who, you know, aren't feeling well on that day, or they have a family emergency, and they end up not being able to take it, which is really unfortunate because there is no makeup date for this. There are 3 dates in October from which schools that are hosting it can choose, but you know, that's pretty much it. Now, if you're taking it, if you're one of those top students that we talked about, and you're taking it for the purpose of hoping to qualify for national merit scholarships, then the way this works is you actually take the test in October of your junior year. It is not until 11 months later that semifinalist status for national merit is announced in September of the 12th grade year. I think this year it was announced on September the 14th. Then that starts an application process. That application process finishes up the next year. So the application process then will result in essays, recommendation letter from your principal, things like that. And the finalists then would be announced in February of your senior year. So the current graduating class, the class of 2017, they still don't know if they're finalists yet. I will tell you that I have only known of one semifinalist not to become a finalist in all my years of doing this. So why is that? That student actually went into it with a very low GPA, about a 2.5, and I said to the mom, you know, I don't know that I would prep him, and she said, even if we just get semifinalist status, we would like that. So he did qualify as a semifinalist, but didn't make it to finalist based upon his GPA. The only thing that qualifies you for semifinalist is your score on the PSAT. Going from semifinalist to finalist is determined by GPA, recommendation letters, essays, things like that. So it is only this PSAT score that can qualify you as a semifinalist. And, you know, and that is sort of unfortunate as an educator. I don't love that because, you know, what that ends up meaning is there are kids who just simply are not great test takers, and then they're not going to do well on that, and maybe they could have qualified with all the other stuff that goes into becoming a finalist. So it's unfortunate. This PSAT is based off the SAT. So the SAT is a 3-hour multiple choice test, and the PSAT is almost that long. A little bit shorter, same areas. So it's also scoring evidence-based reading and writing as well as math. 1520 is a perfect score, 1600 is a perfect SAT, and there is no essay on the PSAT, so there is no essay question. Now, hopefully, if your child took the PSAT, you have your score report in front of you. And I real quick want to launch our next poll, which is which of these tests has your child taken? So, and check any of them that your child has taken. So, pre-ACT, PSAT, ACT, SAT, or you just don't know. So it looks like, okay, keep those coming in. We're getting close to 100% of people voting. Um, so it looks like overwhelmingly the PSAT, but we've got about 30% who've also taken the pre-ACT. So if 85% of you that are on tonight, oh, we're getting higher with more people voting, so let's all vote and we'll close this out in just a second. Hopefully you have your score report. So paper reports were mailed to your high school at the end of December. But your score report was available online December the 12th. And so the way that you access that, we're going to go ahead and close our poll out now. It looks like 86% of you has a child that has already taken the PSAT. And I know some of you will take it again as well. So you're able to go onto your PSAT.org, go online and download or get a copy of your full report. There are pieces on the online report that are available only online and are not on the paper report that your high school maybe gave to you. Some high schools are actually now opting to not have the paper reports at all. It saves them money, and they know that you've got actually more information available online. I'm going to show you what's available paper and online and how we want you guys to use this. If you have not been able to access these scores yet, we did create a blog that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to get your PSAT score report. Now, that image right here at the top, or at the bottom here, is the top part of a score report. So that's the first thing we want to look at. There are two scores. So there's a reading and writing score. So there's actually 4 tests, but the 4 tests go into 2 scores. So there's a reading test, a writing test, a math calculator test, a math non-calculator test, and those are categorized this way, and then the math on this works this way. Reading and writing is scored between 160 and 760, as is the math section, and a PSAT score is actually then added up. So unlike the ACT, where we're looking at an average of all the parts, the PSAT and the SAT are a sum total of those scores. So when you get a score, and this is our sample report, this student scored an 860 on their PSAT. That would also indicate that if they took the SAT later, they would also score an 860 on their SAT. So this is new with the overhauled SAT or PSAT that was introduced in October of 2015. And it is whatever your PSAT score is, it would indicate that that's your probable, your likely SAT score. Now, how do we read this? So we take one of those blocks. So in this instance, this is this individual's evidence-based reading and writing score. This student got a 380 on the scale of 160 to 760. So the scale score is mathematically taking the number of questions that you got right out of the total possible and scaling it to between 160 and 760. So that's number 1. That's a 380. Number 2 is your national sample percentile. This tells you, so in this case, this student scored at the 18th percentile. That means that this student scored higher than 18% of the students who took the test. But that would mean that they scored lower than 82% of the students that took the test, if I just did my math right. Okay, the bottom section, number 3, is telling you if you're meeting the PSAT college and career readiness benchmark. So if you're in the red, this is an area where you really need to strengthen. If your student is in the yellow, it means that you're approaching the college readiness benchmark. And if you're in the green, then you're good to go. You're meeting or exceeding the benchmark. You also have that same thing for your math score. So they give it to you for your reading and writing score, and then they give it to you for your math score as well. Okay, what skills do they assess? So this really breaks down what those skills are. So you've got your reading, your writing and language, your math, but then on the sub-scores, it gives you other areas so that, let's say that you saw that your student was, exceeding the benchmark in math, but you wanted to look at, and if you look at 9, 10, and 11, or I'm sorry, 9, 8, and 7 here, it's telling you that's the scores in those areas. Heart of algebra, problem solving and data analysis, passport to advanced math. You can see where this student is actually doing better on heart of algebra and needs to put the most work into the passport to advanced math. So important to know on what you should be working on. So that helps give you guidance. Really not so much on retaking the PSAT, but on how it's going to affect your ACT and SAT performance. So we're going to look at the skills that are assessed. I will tell you that this only scratches the surface. There is a deeper score and skill breakdown that's available online that you'll want to look at. So this is a screenshot from a student's online score report. Anything that's blue, by the way, on here is a hyperlink that is going to pop up additional information or give you explanation. So those are really important to use. What you're going to see here is it gives you the total number of questions, the correct questions, the incorrect questions, but also the omitted questions. This is not really a webinar or a seminar where we give a lot of testing strategies, but look all the way over to the right. This student omitted one answer. That's a huge mistake. A student should never do that. Because what happens here is on the SAT and the ACT, pre-ACT and PSAT, students are not penalized for an incorrect answer. They only earn points when they answer a question correctly. So there's no penalty for trying. So when I see a student has omitted one, my standard reply is you should never leave anything blank. If you are looking at your student's score report and you see that they omitted answers, that's a discussion that you need to have with them on any future pre-ACT, PSAT, ACT, or SAT testing. Any of this college entrance-based testing, you do not omit answers. I always tell students that the best strategy is if their test proctor says 1 minute remaining and they look down and there's 5 questions and they know there's certainly no way that they are going to be able to answer 5 questions in that amount of time, that they should pick one column and fill it in, bubble it in all the way down. And hopefully they'll pick up maybe another point or 2. That is better than just leaving it blank. So that's a strategy we really, really want our students to use. So on the reading, there's passages, there's graphics that they may have to look at. They will have to use evidence to answer questions. They do test vocabulary here and examine hypotheses and interpret data. It really is a reading comprehension test with vocabulary questions embedded throughout, and and really just there's some inferencing here, which is not common on the ACT part, so students have to draw some hypotheses and make conclusions as well. On the writing and language, this is really where grammar pops up. So students have to not necessarily know, oh, that's the object of the preposition, which would be the grammatical label that we might give something, but instead they just have to know when there's an error and how they would fix it, but they don't need to know those labels. These days in school, we don't have the emphasis that grammar got when we were all as parents diagramming sentences in high school. So this is something that sometimes kids really need to take some time to work on because it doesn't come naturally to them and there's not a huge emphasis on it in school and in their writing. The math. Kids get freaked out. There's actually now, since the PSAT and the SAT were revised, a non-calculator portion, and we have, well, I mean, our kids are all dependent on their phones for everything, right? I have 3 teenagers myself, and that's true of them. So kids are dependent on their calculators. And I always tell kids you should break up with your calculator for a period of time. The questions that are on the non-calculator section, and this is true on the SAT as well, they are truly designed to be answered without a calculator. That shouldn't hinder their ability to answer those questions. So they shouldn't get upset or freaked out about that. Even though the ACT and the pre-ACT doesn't have a non-calculator section, there are questions on those tests that are also, the ACT and pre-ACT, that are also designed to be more easily answered without a calculator. Our students will move faster on those questions if they don't have a calculator. So students shouldn't get upset about that. The math on this only goes up through Algebra 1 and geometry. It's not until the SAT and the ACT that Algebra 2 gets introduced. So the math is Algebra 1 and geometry, real-world problem solving. We did a data analysis, item-by-item analysis of the ACT and the SAT, and over the last couple years, both of them grew significantly in the number of words that are represented on the math section of the test. What does that mean? Lots of word problems. Students are often not comfortable with word problems, and that's where they know that you're able to apply the math that you're learning. So it's something that we can have our kids really work on. Okay, one of the things, we don't just take the PSAT and not learn from it, because the reason students are taking the PSAT is to prepare for future ACT and SAT. So this first screen right here tells you, not only it gives you your question number, it gives you the correct answer, it tells you what your answer was. So you can see this student answered on number 7. That was the first reading question that he or she answered incorrectly and answered as a B when it was actually a C. You can also see it gives you the level of difficulty. So is this an easy, medium, or hard question? So what level questions are you missing? Interestingly enough, on this screenshot, which is an actual student that I know, not one of our PSAT prep students, but a student that we're working on with College Fit, this student was missing mainly easy questions, which is always interesting. Remember, we've got these sub-scores, so if I go back to our sub-scores, this tells you, if we go, see those sub-scores over there on the right? That relates to what we see right here, where sub-score, so what's being tested, and if it affects a cross-test score. So again, answer every single question because it really does have an impact on your scaled score. So what you also have on here is every single actual question. So if we go back over to that reading section where the student's first question they missed was question number 7, where they answered B and the correct answer was C, the student can then access those questions to see not only what area am I missing, but what questions did I miss. And the way this works is, and this is an actual screenshot again, we've got all the questions. The blue is a hyperlink, which will pop something, more information up. So you have to click on the blue number for the question. Then you get the question as well as the answer, the explanation why that question is the right, what the right answer is, and what question difficulty this was. So this is just, it would be silly to take the test and not learn from this. So I encourage you to get your children to get online. This is the stuff that's not available in your paper report. You also have in your score report, both paper and online, next steps. So everything on the left is saying, hey, you're doing really spectacular on these things. However, the stuff on the right is what you need to work on. So for anybody who's getting serious about test prep, which you already know we feel pretty passionately about because we think it makes a difference in scores, which makes a difference in a student's future options. This would be something that you would need to work on as you're doing practice for future ACT and SAT testing. Remember what I said. These tests, well, they're scored differently and they're laid out a little bit differently. what they test is virtually the same. We're going to talk about that. We actually, on Monday, February 6th, are offering a webinar on the updates on the ACT and SAT, and we'll talk about how they're alike and how they're different if you want to join us. That's one of our free webinars that you can register for. Okay, so we talked about, many of you are already getting ready to go ahead and schedule for next year. I had a student who, he's probably out of college by now, but he was a local Cincinnati student, and he had applied to Ohio State, which is really quite challenging to get into. And he got rejected even though he had about a 4.0 GPA. And it was sort of baffling. He had good test scores and, close to 4.0 GPA, and it just didn't fit. And when Ohio State was contacted to ask why this particular student did not get in, they said that he played it too safe in high school. So he had really gone ahead and pursued just college prep level classes so he could get the 4.0 without thinking about the rigor that was appropriate to him. For any of you that listened in on 2 weeks ago on January 9th when I did How to Become What Colleges Want, we talked about that colleges look at not only your GPA, but they also look at taking appropriate rigor. Colleges don't expect students to take every single AP class that's offered at their school, but they do expect them to appropriately challenge themselves. So if a student's taking all college prep classes, getting a 4.0, that's an indicator that they need to step outside their comfort zone and take some more rigor. When you're considering where to take your rigor, and if you're ready, PSAT can be used for this, because when you get into the online, and this is another screenshot, there is a report called your AP Potential. And the way that the AP Potential works is, for this student, the courses on the left are courses that are offered as AP courses, so advanced placement courses. So that could potentially earn you college credit and give you appropriate rigor, so you're attractive to the colleges. The next column that you see where it says AP Potential, when the student has all three bubbles green, that means that this student has a high potential for scoring well on the AP exam. Then the third column indicates whether this particular course is offered at your high school. So our sample student here has high potential to score really well in art history, but that class is not offered at their school. They can really, on the ones where we've got three bubbles in, so it looks like, English language composition, English literature composition, European history, those are offered at this student's school, and the student has very high potential of doing well. Now, I referenced earlier that there are good test takers and bad test takers, and you can have a student who maybe doesn't look online like they have a lot of AP potential, and that's why if you look at our bullet points over here, it's not just let your AP potential from the PSAT guide on whether you're ready for more rigor. You really need to talk to your current teachers, because oftentimes who you are in class, which is more the full portrait of who you are, that is a better predictor than the one-day snapshot. So think of it as like a Polaroid shot or a shot with our iPhone of who you are on a single day. And we all have bad days, and some of us are just not good test takers. So it is quite possible that your teacher might say, encourage you, even though the AP potential looks low, maybe you're just not a great test taker, or you had an off day. Consider your academic success. So where are you already successful? Like I said, a college wouldn't expect you to take AP in math, science, English, social studies, all the way across the board, but where you have been successful and where it's appropriate, and then weigh your future goals. Sometimes I see students who, they can handle the rigor in a particular area, but let's say they have AP potential and teacher recommendation for AP English classes, but they're going to be an engineer, and they also have the potential in the math and science, I would say, there's only so many hours in a day. You need to be well-rounded. So I would encourage them to take it in the math and science and not necessarily pursue it in the English area, even though potentially they could be successful in the English class. But you've also got to have, and if you missed me talking on January the 9th about what colleges want, the latest trends in college admissions, that recording is available on our blog. And we talked there about the importance of the resume and what comes into play there. Somebody has a question. Are College Credit Plus courses respected as well as AP or honors classes? That is a great question. The answer to that will vary a little bit from college to college, but the general answer is AP courses are better respected across the board. So if I had to give you an answer, I would say AP. However, what happens is if a student applies out of state and that state, let's say we have an Ohio student applying for school in Florida. The Florida universities are not as familiar with the rigor of the high school that your child attended, the college that the College Credit Plus was offered through. So they can say, we just don't know. AP is a national test and it's a known entity and it's more black and white to them. And so that's why they like it better, because they feel like they know what they're dealing with as far as the rigor, where the feeling is that College Credit Plus rigor could vary a little bit depending on the college and depending on the high school. So that's why colleges tend to favor it. With that said, if you have a child who is, for sure, I always say nobody really knows for sure at this stage of the game, having just been through this because I have a freshman in college myself. If you really think you're staying in Ohio, then I don't think that the College Credit Plus will be a barrier in lieu of AP courses. But if you're really uncertain or you're looking for highly selective schools, such as an Ivy, or even just half a step below that, or out of state, then most colleges would tell you that they would err on the side of AP. So that is a great question. Thank you for asking that. So for this student, this really messed up. That shouldn't have been on top of that. Okay, so I did say I'm going to talk about what's underneath and on top. So if you're a sophomore, you have a sophomore child and you are on the call today and you're thinking, you know what, I missed it. I should have had my sophomore academically talented student take the PSAT last October. Lisa just said it's too late. We are actually going to give a practice PSAT on April 22nd in Cincinnati for 10th graders only. And we don't want any and every student coming, going ahead, and you know what, let me pause this for 1 second. I want to get this off of here. Okay, much better. So on April 22nd in Cincinnati, we will give we will go ahead and give a PSAT. The only students we really want to do that, and you can register on our website for that, are academically talented sophomores. There's no reason for the juniors to take it. It's too early, freshmen. We wouldn't recommend you taking it. But if you're trying to figure out if your kid's in the realm of he or she should prep for national merit, you can come and take that with us on April 22nd. So more information on our website. So if you're looking at the score report and you're saying, hey, my kid scored really well, here's how this works. So if you have, there are some colleges that will give a full ride. So University of Alabama, University of Texas at Dallas, and many others, think Oklahoma. There are a list of schools that give absolutely a full ride. So that's huge money. And so if you're a 10th grader and you scored well, and we call that a selection index of 190. So the selection index can be found on page 2 of your PSAT report. So page 2 of PSAT report, I think it's on the upper left-hand side, it'll give you your selection index. That's the number that we're looking at, and that's what National Merit uses for determining semifinalist status. If you have a sophomore that scored 190 or higher, then that would put your sophomore in the realm of possibly hitting the National Merit qualifying score next October. So that's for current sophomores. If you have a junior and your junior scored at 217, but maybe even 215 to 219 in that range, that is the range that we expect next September will be announced as National Merit semifinalist. The National Merit Selection Index for the class of 2017, this year's seniors, is a 217. So we always base what we're aiming for on what the historical range has been. So the past 5 years it's been between 212 and 217. However, the graduating class of 2017, who took the took the test in 2015, they had to have a 217. It's the highest that we've ever had. So this is based on a score of 228 points. So if that's how what you're aiming for, this is kind of how the numbers work. And I got a couple of questions that are coming in. Somebody wants to know the range for commendable certification. So there's National Merit semifinalist, and then there's a commended student status. And if you contact if you go ahead and you contact National Merit, they will not reveal to you what the commended student range is or where that cutoff is. However, we've found in years past it's down around, it'll probably be down around 205 is where it is. So commended students is a feather in your cap. It looks great on a resume. It's not going to come along with the scholarships that a finalist would get. So good question. Let's see, another question here. How likely will that score increase if your child is close? So that's a hard one to answer because ACT and SAT changed a lot recently, and this PSAT has only been given twice now. So we don't have a depth of data since it was redesigned. On the old test, the College Board did a study, and they said that you can expect a student naturally to increase about 10 points. On the old test, our average increase was 28.8 points, so we were almost 3 times as high as the average increase. It's rare that I see a student go down, but how much will they go up? That depends on how much work they put in. One of the handouts that I posted, I actually have 2 handouts on there. I've got one which is about our PSAT prep program that is only open to high-scoring students. We really only want those students who are sophomores with a selection index of 190 or higher doing that program, because honestly, your PSAT score will not get you anything else. Yes, 28 points on the selection index to the person who just asked me that. So, we had a number of students who just got their scores back, so they're current juniors, and we had a number of them go through our prep program that scored at the 215 to actually into the 220s. And so we anticipate that at least 217 at the least, but maybe even as low as 215 will make it into National Merit semifinalists. So we've been doing this for this part of our prep program for about the last 10 years. Another question. Any advice for students with learning disabilities on service plans for college acceptance? He did well on the PSAT, but not well on the pre-ACT. So you might want to do a consultation with us. But I would encourage you to be sure that you apply for whatever accommodations your child is eligible for. SAT in December and this goes for PSAT as well, just announced that they've changed their accommodation process. So now if a student's on a 504 or an IEP, and that's given to College Board, the student will automatically get those same accommodations on their PSAT and SAT. On the ACT, there's not that guarantee, But the family, once you've registered for an ACT, you need to go ahead and apply for accommodations, and you start that process as the family online, and that's new. It used to be that your school would start that process for you, so that's a new one. So the family's got to be in charge of that. What we have found is with ACT, they will sometimes turn people down on a first request, but then go ahead and confirm them on appeal. So you need to do accommodation requests in advance so that you've got time to appeal if necessary. As you already know, the state's giving all juniors the ACT or SAT, and for the state testing, it is up to the high school to apply for your accommodations for you. It is not up to the parent. Okay, what if I was just talking to the people that aren't you and you're going, man, my kid didn't score as well? You have time to improve, so I would say don't fret. This is about test prep to a degree. Nothing can replace taking appropriately rigorous courses, and you've probably heard me say the word rigor, how many times, half a dozen times at least in this webinar. So taking appropriate rigorous classes and doing well in them, reading and writing a ton, and getting assistance to shore up your weak areas. You could, just like the person who asked the question about accommodations, that their student didn't do well on the pre-ACT but did well on the PSAT. Well, there are students who maybe don't do well on the PSAT, but they do far better on the ACT. That was my own college son. He did not do well on the PSAT. He was a very bright kid, did spectacular on the ACT. So these tests are different from one another, and so don't be discouraged. There are things that can be done, certainly, and you try the other test. And that's one of the things that Sherry in our office can help you with. Anybody can email or call Sherry at any time, and she will guide you through looking at past ACT, SAT, pre-ACT, PSAT, GPA, college goals, and help you figure out which test your child should take, when they should take it, how many times, and what prep is recommended. So that's a free service we offer to anybody, regardless of whether you are using us for test prep or not. So I would encourage everybody to take advantage of that for sure. So how do these scores compare? They're testing the same things. The only difference is the SAT does have an optional essay section, just like the ACT does, but the pre-ACT does not. So how do you determine this? If you want to do this on your own, what I usually say is you can't compare scores because, as we already said, the PSAT is on a scale of 15-20. The SAT is on a 1600 scale, the ACT is on a 36-point scale, as is the pre-ACT. So go with the percentile scores. If the two scores are really dead on each other, then I would take both the ACT and the SAT once and then repeat whichever you did better on. If there is a 10% or more difference between the two tests, then I would say start with the higher one. Just a reminder, Ohio high school juniors are taking the ACT or the SAT this spring. If you have a junior or even if you have a sophomore, you might want to become familiar with that and what it means about graduation and other ACTs or SATs that you would take by going ahead and joining us on February the 6th for our update on the ACT and the SAT. You can also go ahead and email us to request your ACT/SAT plan. So with that brings us to a close. As a review, these are for practicing for ACT and SAT. These should help you determine what appropriate rigor that you should be taking, help you determine if you should be taking ACT or SAT. So they are really invaluable, these pre-tests. So if we don't have any other questions, I'll just give it a second. It was really great being with everybody tonight, and this recording will be available over on our blog.